everyone, hope you are doing well. I'm pleased to be joined by Tom from Fantasy Premier League by Dummies. Tom, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm not bad at all, mate. Thanks for inviting me on.
Not here to talk about FPL, though. We're here to talk about Brentford. Can you give me the lowdown on your season so far, please?
So far, so far, so good. I mean, if you told me on the weekend that I'd be disappointed with a 2-2 draw against Spurs, then yeah, I think that sums up how well we're doing this year. So, I mean, 10th now after the games from this week. Couldn't be going much better, really, for a second season. I think after last season, everyone was a little bit worried that we maybe would falter a little bit. But no, I mean, so far, so good. Really, really happy with how we're playing. Obviously, Mr. Frank's just signed a new contract, even though there's the talks with, obviously, when Southampton sat their boss, when Villa obviously got before Emery went in, there was lots of talk about if Frank was sort of a replacement for those jobs. Still was talk about him if Brendan went at Leicester, that they would look potentially towards Thomas Frank. So yeah, so far, great start to the season. Very, very happy.
Were you genuinely worried that you would lose Thomas Frank at any point?
I wasn't. I know there's lots of people that were thinking that potentially it's because I guess for me looking at it, it's what's his next step, and I think he's a good enough manager to manage a bigger club, we'll say. But obviously, the step from going maybe Brentford to one of the top 6 teams is never really going to happen, unless he had unless it was a season where we broke into Europe or something like that. So really, then it's stepping into a team which had more money. So Leicester was my worry really if Brendan got the sack there. Villa, I think, have the ambition and the money behind them where they could have sort of sniffed around a little bit. But I think he doesn't come across as a manager who would move for money, but from an ambition point of view. But I think he's seen the project we've got going at Brentford, and he's bought into it. He's obviously been there. I think he's on 2 years as assistant manager, 4 years now as coach. And yeah, obviously now into 2027, he's contracted too. So I was never worried. I know there was lots of people who sort of thought about it. And when you think about it, if he's going to move on, then that would have been a good opportunity at Villa or Leicester if Brendan did go.
What is the long term? You've used the word project there a couple of times, and from the outside looking in, Brentford and Brighton are the 2 clubs you look at and think they've got a plan, but not only have they got a plan, they're working to it, and the plan itself is working. So what does the future hold for Brentford, do you think?
I don't know, really. I think the nice thing about where we've got to now is it's almost, getting into the Premier League was sort of the next step, and then it's sort of, okay, now solidifying ourselves in the Premier League and becoming an established Premier League team. We will, I don't think, ever have the money that, your likes of your Man Cities, your Newcastles now, your Liverpool's, Chelsea's, Man United's. But trying to break into that sort of top half and be sort of a regular top half team. Obviously, the Premier League each season is different, as shown obviously by yourselves this year. But I mean, if we can keep investing and buying players at good prices, selling them off for a lot more money, which is what we've done over the years, then hopefully we can then establish ourselves to becoming a strong team. Top 10 team would be great. It's one of those you can't really see. Can I see us winning the league? At the moment, probably not. In the next 10 years, probably not. Let's be honest. So, but being in the top 10, I mean, and being a team that can compete in the Premier League, be able to watch good football every week, and yeah, that works for me at the moment. So.
Are you worried about relegation this season?
You'll have to ask me in a few weeks' time to see what happens with Mr. Ivan Toney, but at the moment, no, not at all.
Well, I was going to ask that because you don't really know. You don't even know when it's going to reach a conclusion, do you? It might be after the January transfer window that a verdict has come to, and again, you don't know what's going to happen with him. But that's why I was asking, are you worried about it at the minute, or are you perfectly calm? I mean, if Toney got handed a lengthy ban, would you then worry?
If he got a ban, it would become more of a worry. But without sounding naive, I guess, I'm not particularly worried. I think the problem or the benefit for us really is there's 3 worse teams, at least minimum, in this year in the league, who definitely all don't have goal scorers. So we do have players that can play in that position. There's players that sort of haven't really been given a chance to play in that position. If talk about the likes of like Johan Visser, who's, comes off the bench and scores every other week. As you know from last year's visit to the Olympic Stadium, he scored that last minute winner against yourselves. But no, I'm not worried. I think the nice thing about it is they've already mentioned, and obviously, the management that we've got behind the scenes have already put in place, and are looking. So if there was a case that they needed to buy someone, I'm sure there's already targets and people who are sort of gone, right, these are players we can get in and these are players we can afford to buy in the January transfer window if needed. So at the moment, no, not worried. But obviously it only takes a few results really for it to completely flip on itself. So that's 3 points against Spurs would have been nice, because again it would have just given that additional buffer really, just to keep us rolling.
Random question about the transfer window. Are you always, as a Brentford fan, are you always confident that when you sign a player it's going to work out? Because again, from a neutral perspective, we have this perception that you've got transfer activity nailed down to a T. You're identifying of the players, your value for money for players, buying them young, selling them on and stuff. It's almost like the Red Bull model before the Red Bull model was a thing to some extent. So when it comes to January transfer window and your club's linked to someone and you go and pursue that player, are you as a fan, just regardless of opinion of him or whether you've heard of him, do you just have that extra level of confidence, do you think, in the transfer working compared to what, say, a West Ham fan would have and when we go after a player?
Yeah. I think it's slightly different, because I think the money we talk about from our side is obviously nothing compared to sort of some of the larger transfers. So when you buy a player, I mean, we've had players that have sort of been purchased and have not done what we expected. I think the best recent examples are Frank Onyeka. He's come in, he's been a good squad player. We spent, relatives amount of money on, I think it was about 15 million, so nothing crazy. But he's sort of not really hit the levels of what people expected him. I think that was actually one of the players we bought in that people were expecting more of than what we got from him. But then you flip it to the other side and you look at Ivan Toney for 10 million is crazy value. If you go further back, you've got the likes of obviously Benrahma with yourselves. Obviously you spent 25 million from Bayern and Foss. I think we spent about 2 million on him. Ollie Watkins obviously went to Villa. There's a lot of players that we've purchased over the years that have done well, and they've obviously, the good thing is they do their due diligence on these players, and so I always have a confidence when we're linked with a player. If they do buy them, then I'm going, okay, right, there's got to be something about them that's interesting. I think this year's one was obviously Mikkel Damsgaard. We haven't seen what he can do yet. Obviously, last season was injured for pretty much the whole season. Again, will be a really interesting player if Toney gets a ban, because we haven't really seen what he can do, and that could be quite interesting. So yeah, always relatively confident with what they do. The man in charge knows what he's doing, so we trust. I mean, we're pretty trustworthy of what they do at Brentford.
Last question on yourselves. Which players should West Ham fans be looking out for? I assume West Ham fans watching this aren't too familiar with your players, obviously minus Ivan Toney. Is there anyone in form that we should expect a good game from?
I mean, the player that sort of always goes under the radar for us, and because of the position he plays, is Christian Norgard. Back fit, proper first game, I say, against Spurs. He allows us to sort of, where if he's not in the team, then we have to play two really sitting in the middle just to control the midfield. When he's playing, tackles everything, great passer of the ball, works really hard. For me, he's the underrated player in the team, and actually, I'd say that yes, you can look at Ivan Toney and the goals he scores, but actually, I think Christian Norgard is what makes us feel better as a team. So, I mean, he's definitely the one to sort of watch for us for the game on this week.
Well, I'm glad you've said that, because we did our preview and then I had to do like an opposition prediction on Patreon, and he's the player I picked out in both, saying I think he goes under the radar and I think he had a big hand in Christian Eriksen looking as good as he did at Brentford kind of thing. And would Eriksen would have succeeded without somebody like Norgard next to him? I'm not too sure, actually. So I'm pleased that Brentford's fans come along and backed up what I just said as well. Right, before we get on to West Ham, the elephant in the room, we're not wearing the same T-shirt.
No, mine is a Brentford one. Yeah.
I've made an error here picking a red one for the Brentford opposition preview, but here we are. Right, West Ham, what's your thoughts on us? What's your thoughts on Hammers?
A bit shocked this year so far. I think that's the best way to sum up, really. I mean, when you look at the squad, when you look at the individuals, the team's ridiculous. It is a great side. I thought the signings you made in summer were good signings. You look at the, Paquetá and obviously Scamacca both coming in, you go, oh, that's, from last season, you go, oh, okay, they're looking to push on this year. I watched the Arsenal game the other day, and I don't know, it just, obviously Arsenal are in great form themselves, and I thought the first 45 minutes, you didn't look bad at all. I mean, they obviously controlled the ball, controlled the game. You got the goal and went 1-0 up, and then that period was sort of like, well, it didn't really look like Arsenal were going to get back into it at that point. So it's really, I don't really know what's not happening, if that makes sense. You've got all the players in the right positions. Obviously, Bowen's not really been on fire like he was last year. That's obviously a big miss because obviously, was it 20 odd goals last season? Was that right? Or
yeah, in all competitions, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was ridiculous last season, and this season obviously just a little bit off the boil. Same with maybe Antonio as well. Obviously, had a great start to last season. Obviously, second half of the season wasn't so good for him, but I mean, the goals he scored in the first half obviously got you some serious amount of points. From the game on the weekend, watching what's going to happen, I have really no idea because it's what West Ham turns up, I guess. I wasn't expecting you guys to be anywhere near the bottom of the table. That's absolutely not. And then obviously when there was talk about Moyes going, I was like, well, surely that's the most ridiculous idea. Going with the fact that you know, well, not even the fact that if you sack him's a bad idea, it's who would you get in instead? That's more so. And yeah, I just don't really know what's going on at the moment. From the outside, that's what it looks like.
Yeah, this is why I like doing these opposition previews. I always like to hear what fans of other clubs think about our club, just to see what you're thinking. That you've mentioned David Moyes there. It's always interesting to see what people think looking in. Do you think West Ham could get relegated this season?
No, definitely not. I think it's one of those, when you look at the squad and you look at the quality in the squad, you'll definitely have enough to not go down, if that makes sense. If you look at comparative to some of the other sides, obviously, I know there's obviously new managers going to certain places, but I was speaking to a Wolves fan a few weeks ago, and he was saying basically no hope, and that was basically his words. So I think you have three teams that are definitely going to be worse than yourselves. I personally think that you'll see West Ham go on a run of form and a run of fixtures, and they'll start picking up lots of results and doing well. Hopefully not this weekend, but after this game, great, no problem at all. But no, I can't see you guys going down. I think that would be probably one of the biggest shocks of the year if you were to be at the bottom, even towards the end of the season. I think it'd be relatively safe
for a bit of fun. For a bit of fun, who do you fancy to go down at this point? Now, obviously, there's more than half the season to go, but who are you feeling at the minute? Because obviously, we're a point outside of relegation zone. Yep. You are, I use the word only here, but you are only 6 points ahead of West Ham. Yep. You know, we've won the same amount of games. We've both won 4 games. It's just like you've drawn a lot, whereas we've lost a lot. Which 3 teams you have to bet right now on 3 teams to get relegated? Who would they be?
It's probably going to be the bottom 3 that they are at the moment. You've got, I mean, Wolves obviously got a result over the other day against Everton, but even though they've been poor, there's always the chance that Calvert-Lewin does come back to fitness, and if he comes back to fitness, it's a goal scorer. You know, he can score goals. We've seen it on maybe not the last 2 seasons because of lack of fitness and then because of injuries, but they do have a goal scorer there. I think they do have quite a solid defence there. Wolves just look awful. They don't have a goal scorer. I mean, the record signing Fabio Silva is basically on loan, isn't he, for the rest of the season? Doesn't play. Nottingham Forest, unless they go crazy in the January transfer window again, but surely they just can't. You imagine, you know, that would be ridiculous. And then Southampton, they obviously just can't score goals at the moment, and they can't rely on James Ward-Prowse's free kicks every 5 minutes to get them out of danger. So defensively, they look atrocious, and I can't see. I think Everton will be in and around there maybe if Calvert-Lewin doesn't come fit. I think Leeds have enough, and Bournemouth have looked much better recently in recent games, so I think they'll be okay too.
Yeah, big relegation battle. I think Palace are going to get sucked into it. I'm convinced. Yeah. I don't know why. I've just got this feeling that Palace are just going to plummet like a stone over the next few weeks, and before you know it, they're going to be lingering around that area. I don't know. It's just the vibes I'm picking up from Crystal Palace fans as well. But anyway, let's turn our attentions to Friday night then. West Ham at home to Brentford. How do you see that match going?
I mean, surely in form at the moment, I've got to be confident, and I've got to say, you know, we can probably get a result at yourselves. Obviously, you're not playing amazing at the moment. I think if you'd come back after the World Cup and sort of put up a bet, you know, being better against Arsenal, then I'm maybe a bit more worried. I thought we played really well against Spurs, and I think we seem to play well against the sort of, I'm going to say, bigger teams, and I think I include West Ham as part of that, because obviously, like I said, the quality of your squad is good, and I think we will. I don't think it's one we'll take for granted where I think you've seen a lot of times this season where we've played teams that we can say are lower half teams, where we sort of completely stepped off the gas and we just don't look up for it. Whereas I think a team, and going to West Ham, obviously, being in London as well, it's an interesting one. And obviously it becomes a London derby, even though, I mean, they're completely opposite ends of of London. I think I'm relatively confident that we'll get a result. Whether we can win, I'm not sure. I'd probably put us at a draw. But
what makes you stop saying that you're going to win? What is it that's like pulling you back a little bit?
I think for me, it's West Ham aren't a bad side, and I think a lot of people this year have gone, oh, just because they're not getting the results, they're easy. You're gonna smash them, but I don't think that's the case. I do think you have the quality. I mean, all you need is Jarrod Bowen to have a 5-minute spell where he's on fire and he could score 1 or even 2 goals if you want him to. You've got players in there. Benrahma always seems to step up and score against us in recent times we've played, so I wouldn't put it past him picking up a bit of form and scoring himself. So how we play against you, I'm unsure whether I think personally we'll step up and we'll be up for it. It's a game that I think usually we're up for against West Ham, but it's one of those where I'm not sure whether they'll be a little bit held back slightly.
Can I get your score prediction? Just give me a random score prediction. I don't hold you to it, don't worry, but you've got to give one. But I've got another question for you. But before we do that, prediction time. Come on, what you got?
I'm going to go 1-1.
That's what I went for. I went for 1-1 as well. I've gone for that. Last question. Saïd Benrahma. He's almost had like an inconsistent period at West Ham. He's been here long enough now to have settled in, but there's always been this vibe of, I don't know a fractured relationship perhaps between Saïd Benrahma and David Moyes.
Yeah.
What was he like at Brentford? Because at West Ham he often doesn't track back very often, which I think irritates David Moyes and sees him getting either substituted or not played as often as he'd like to. Can sometimes be a bit inconsistent even during the 90 minutes where his shots are a little bit tame or whatever like that. What was he like at Brentford?
Unbelievable. I think the difference he had when he moved to West Ham was he went from being the star player at Brentford, or being part of that star front three where he had obviously Benrahma, Watkins and Mbeumo, and he was sort of he was the main between him and Watkins. They were the players. I think obviously when he moved to West Ham, he wasn't that star player. He wasn't the sort of he's coming in at £90 million and he's going to set the world on fire. He was just sort of coming in as a good player who would probably play most games, but whether he'd be sort of that star player. And I think he seems to, I think for me, when I watch West Ham, it's like he doesn't seem to get the run of games, which gives him, I think he's one of those players that just needs a good run of games to get himself, because I think in Brentford, he went through a dodgy patch where he would have like a few games where he'd be sort of completely anonymous. No one really know what was happening. And then all of a sudden would go on that streak of just like, scoring every time he touched the ball, taking on players. I remember rainbow flick against Bristol City down the wing. He would just do those things. And I think it was one of those where when he got that run of games, he just had that confidence to go, he wasn't getting dropped because he was playing slightly poorly or what we weren't expecting of him. He sort of built that confidence up, managed to get in, continue playing how he did, and just built from that. And I think for me, when I see it and I'm like looking at the team sheet every so often when when I look at the West Ham team sheet and I'm like, okay, he's not in the team this week. Next week he's in the team. He's out the team, in the team, sort of thing like that. And I don't think he gets that consistency where he can sort of go, I mean, because you have the players that you have, your Fornals and other players that sort of playing in those positions where he won't always start. And he is, that's the nature of the Premier League. But I think he liked it that he would play 30, 40, 50 games a season and be very consistent. And for me, when he played at Brentford, it was unbelievable to watch some of the things he'd pull off. You'd be like, that's just almost a cockiness to his game, which I don't think I see at West Ham. It's almost like he doesn't have the confidence to try those things at the moment. So I think he still has the ability, and I think he will hopefully become a player that, it starts for you every game. If not, then we'll welcome him back at Brentford. So
brilliant. Well, thanks for that, Tom, because Benrahma's always been, I think he used to be a player that used to split the fan base as to whether he was good or not, enough or not for West Ham and for the Premier League. And I think more people now feel like he is, but we don't feel like he's had a fair crack with the manager, if you like. And
right.
Against Arsenal, David Moyes only dug out one player really after the game. It was Saïd Benrahma for giving the ball away, which led to their equaliser. But you've seen that game. You saw Fabianski allowing Martinelli to score from a really poor angle. You saw Soufal a few yards behind the defence for playing Saka on, and Nketiah turned to Keller. It was Benrahma that got dug out, and the fans saying, "Well, a minute now, this is what's going on here. This is a bit unusual." So just interesting to get your perspective, because obviously you've become a £25 million player at your club, so you must have done something right.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely.
But anyway, Tom, yes.
No, I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a good player, and we'll I think he'll get there. He just needs the time, really.
Good man. Well, Tom, thank you very much for joining me. I massively appreciate it.
No problem at all. No, been a pleasure.
And if you guys at home have enjoyed it, please drop a like on it by clicking the thumbs up. You can check out the latest. It's been a while, but they'll be back soon. But you want to check out the latest FPL by Dummies podcast. The link will be in the description, where you can hear more of Tom talking about Fantasy League. Myself, I'll catch you tomorrow.